Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Now entering the game for Philly Pressbox Radio, Bill Furman and Jim Chet Chesko.
It's Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. Welcome to the Philly Pressbox Radio Roundtable, brought to you by the Irish Rover Station House in Langhorne, PA, Cavs, Philly Tailgates, and the Edge of Philly Sports Network. I'm Bill Furman. I'll be your host tonight, along with my partner, Jim Chet Chesko. And Chet, the Phillies bats have been slow, but the NL at least lead has reached 9 games, even with another blown opportunity again today. Eagles camp opens today. Paul George is in town. Matvei Michkov is in town. It's a summer of fun in Philly. We have plenty to talk about in Philly sports, that's for sure. By the way, great job last week while I was gone.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for that. It sure was a lot of fun. Always nice to welcome a first-time guest to the show, and we had 2 of them last week. Edge of Philly's Phil Stifle, who was terrific, and we had a stand-up comic, Steve Cooper, who was also a lot of fun. Enjoyed talking with both of those guys. But, hey, it's great to have you back, Bill, even though you had a whirlwind week traveling around the country, and now you're in Cleveland.
Yeah, it's been busy, but Salt Lake City, let's see, Austin, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Charlotte, Tampa, Cleveland, all since last Wednesday. So it's all good. But, hey, we got a couple great guests tonight who are making return visits to Philly Pressbox Radio, and Baseball Hall of Famer Paul Hagen and Bleeding Green Nation's Brandon Lee Gowton joining us tonight.
Yeah, 2 of our favorites, Bill, and lots of topics to address with those guys. So we're just about ready, right? Almost.
We are. But before we get started, let's give a shout out to all the shows at the Edge of Philly Sports Network this week. As always, the gang has all the bases covered. You can catch all the action on www.eopsports.com, as well as Edge of Philly Sports on YouTube. You can also find our show on our Philly Pressbox Radio YouTube channel. That's where I watched you, Chet, last week on the YouTube channel. Check it out. Please help us out. Hit those subscribe, follow, and like buttons. And as always, share with your family and friends. As you know, every day we're covering Philly sports at Philly Edge of Philly Sports Network. Don't forget, subscribe to the weekly newsletter. Sign up for free. Receive the EOP weekly review in your email every Friday morning. And with that, Chet, let's get to business. Let's get to it and welcome Paul Hagen back to Philly Pressbox Radio. Paul, welcome.
Good to be back.
Hey, Paul, good to see you again. We're excited about this Phillies team. They've had a great season, on track for 101 wins, but at one point it was 116. The last few series haven't gone too well. They've lost 3 series in a row surrounding an all-star break, lost 2 out of 3 to Oakland at home, and now 2 out of 3 on the road to both Pittsburgh and Minnesota. What's going on, and should we be concerned?
Well, I think there's a couple things here. The Phillies really have made their season so far. They were 8-8 after the first 16 games, and then they played 771 baseball, which is 37-11. That translates. That's a 125 win pace. So I think we all knew that wasn't going to continue. But the rest of the season, they've been a 500 team. They're 19-19 since then, 8-8 before then. So I think the question becomes, obviously they weren't as good as they were when they were playing, really way over the head of anybody. Yeah. But are they better than what they've shown in the other games? And I think we'll find out. The next 7 of their next 9 series are against teams that would be in the playoffs if they started today. And I think that's 29 out of their 35 games against teams with winning records. So I think that if this is a regression to the norm type lull, it's probably a good time for them to come out of it. They've shown that they can play a lot better than this. Now they have to start showing it.
Yeah, it's surprising to me that it's been the bats that have been more quiet. Obviously, the bullpen blew today's game, but the starting pitching, for the most part, is still solid. We didn't expect Ranger Suarez to have a 1 ERA all season long. But the bats have been a little slower, I think, than we expected.
Well, I think a couple things. Suarez, no, he wasn't going to have that ERA all year. But the fact that both he and Zach Wheeler were having some physical issues at the end of the first half, I think is a concerning part. We do know after last night that Zach Wheeler pitches really well on 14 days rest, but I don't think we're going to see that again anytime soon. So let's sort of see how he and Rangers settle back in. Nola is going to be Nola, apparently. Sanchez, and we don't really know what the fifth spot's going to be. There's some talk, obviously, about going to a 6-man rotation in August, which would take some of the pressure off. And, as long as the Braves don't get hot, they do have the luxury of having some cushion that they don't have to push things. They don't have to bring guys back on short rest. They can sort of do it at their own pace. The one thing that I would say is a little concerning to me now, really, of all the issues, I think the hitters will hit because they always have. So the offense doesn't really concern me that much, but the bullpen really is starting to bother me a little bit. As recently as June 26th, coming out of the Detroit series, the bullpen ERA was 3.31. Since then, it's 6.38 in 22 games, which has raised it to 4.0 for the year. They're not throwing strikes. They're not being effective. They're not throwing first pitch strikes particularly. So I think two things about that as we are here a little before the trade deadline. Does it change their focus from a right-handed outfield bat to an arm? And are they more willing to give up more to get something, or do they think they're going to come through all this and they don't have to overpay?
Well, speaking of that, the trade deadline coming up, it is next Tuesday, July 30th. You mentioned the possibility of them going for some pitching. Now, we expect both Turnbull and Taijuan Walker to be back in late August. But in the meantime, we have Tyler Phillips, who has looked good. Do you think they could go for a starting pitcher, or will it certainly be just for a reliever?
I would guess a reliever, partly because a starting pitcher, particularly a really good one, is going to cost you an arm and a leg. Yeah. And, it's really hard, I think. I wrote a story for NBC Sports Philadelphia today, sort of comparing the situation the Phillies are in now to the 2001 Mariners, where they had the best record in baseball. They had 8 All-Stars. They had 6 guys ending up getting MVP votes, including Ichiro, who won it all as a rookie. But Lou Piniella all year long said, I want another left-hand bat. I want another left-hand bat. The right move wasn't out there. They didn't make it, and then they get beaten in the LCS by the Yankees. So, I think that when you have the kind of lead that the Phillies have and that the Mariners had back then, it's a lot harder to overpay for something. You don't want to do something like that you may not need and then regret it down the road if the guy becomes really good. Whereas if you're on the verge of making it, you might be a little more inclined to try to do something a little more bold.
Yeah. And it looks like, I guess, I've already lost confidence in Jose Alvarado. I never really had a lot of confidence in him. But now it looks like Rob Thompson probably has too, with Matt Strom and Jeff Hoffman being the guys. Kirkring didn't get it done today. What does Alvarado need to do to get back into good graces and be an 8th and 9th inning guy? They need him.
Well, I think just throw strikes. That was his reputation when the Phillies got him from the Rays, that he had a great arm, but he didn't have the kind of control and command that you need to be effective. And I don't know whether – you never know whether there's a nagging physical thing that's causing problems. Either they don't announce that kind of thing, so we have to kind of guess sometimes. So it could always be that. Or he could have lost a little confidence. And, when a pitcher loses confidence, they tend to try to nibble a little. And if you nibble, you fall behind. And if you fall behind, you got to come in with strikes that are more hittable. So it could be something as simple as that.
Do you think they will go for some outfield help? You mentioned that possibility in addition to pitching. A lot of people are still not sold on Rojas in center. Marsh has been kind of inconsistent. He had the bad play in the field today. If they went for an outfielder, would it be a guy who could start or just some depth?
Well, I think the first thing would be is a right-handed bat. The fact that Castellanos looks like he might be getting hot, and I think Weston Wilson's going to get a chance at least for a few more days to show what he can do, and that could probably tip the scales one way or the other. But if you look at the Phillies, as good as their offense has been, the outfield as a whole is in the lower third offensively in most of the major categories. So, and particularly since Brandon Marsh has not, even though they keep saying they're going to give him a chance to prove he can hit left-handed pitching, he hasn't had that much of a chance. When he hasn't gotten it done. So I think if they do get a bat, it would be a right-handed bat. And I think it would depend whether it's a starter or a reliever, depending on what's available. I mean, a starter or a bench guy, what's available and how much they're going to have to pay. I personally think Luis Robert Jr. would be a terrific guy to add, but he hasn't been healthy. He's been on the IL 6 times since opening day in 2021. And he's a great talent, but he's got 3 more years of control, which means he's going to be expensive. If I'm the Phillies, I'm not going to be anxious to overpay. They're just now getting the farm system back to where they would like it to be. And I'm not sure this is the time to start rating it just to try to add to a team that already has the best record in baseball.
Well, I'd say without a doubt, the most disappointing Philly to me this year has been Bryson Stott. I'm expecting this was going to be a breakout year for him, a 300-plus season. And heck, he's at 230, and now he's sitting as much as he's playing. How do you fix that?
Well, if you trust him and you think he's good, you let him work. You work with him on the side and pick your spots for him. Try to give him a break against guys that he may have a little more difficulty with. And I think a lot of it's confidence, and so just have him work. If he's got a flaw in his swing, I'm sure they will. They got so much video these days, and they can run them side by side and run them on top of each other and see if he's doing any little thing different. A lot of times it's just a matter of, hitting the ball, letting the ball get to you a little more, being confident, seeing the ball well, knowing the strike zone. We saw with Trey Turner last year, and it's obviously a extreme example, but here's a guy who didn't do much for 4 months of the season and then got really hot in the last 2 months. So baseball, they say baseball is a funny game, and they're right.
Right.
Yeah, Turner's having a great year this year, too. It's unfortunate he had that injury that kept him out 6 weeks. And then we got Alec Boehm. Still not really a power hitter. You'd like to see a little more power from him, but he, after a little slump, is getting back into it. He's kind of a doubles machine. So are you liking Boehm? And is he going to be, a fixture and a guy who's going to be here for another 10 years?
I would certainly think so. You never know what's going to happen, an injury or whatever. But I like his swing a lot. I think doubles are a very underrated stat. I think doubles really help you a lot. And he has shown an ability to hit with runners in scoring position. That's why he's got all the RBIs. As you said, he's been in a little slump lately. I haven't really looked to see how many opportunities he's had with runners in scoring position. But I think, when you consider where he is at this point in his career, in theory, he should have a lot. His best years probably should be ahead of him.
Yep.
Yeah, I like him a lot. Hey, Paul, there's a real good chance, as long as he stays healthy, that there could be a batting title coming for Trey Turner. He's got a huge lead, but he doesn't have enough at bats yet. Bryce Harper having a good year, but I have to ask you, now that we're in the DH era in the National League, what's your thoughts about a DH winning the MVP?
Well, for me, a DH would have to be head and shoulders above somebody who played in the field. I think you can make a case right now. And again, we've got, more than 2 months left in the season, 2.5 months left in the season, whatever it is. So I think it's a little early to be even talking about that really. But if the season ended today, I think you'd almost have to say Ohtani has done enough, even as a pure DH, that he's just been so good. But if it's close, then I think you have to start, saying, well, did this guy also contribute in the field? And I think that's what it'll end up coming down to.
Hey, Paul.
I mean, I will say this for Bryce Harper. He's been the player of the month 2 of the first 3 months of the year. So I think that's got to count for something.
Yeah. Paul, you mentioned the Phillies' tough schedule upcoming, and as I post the schedule here, I know it's tough to see, but they do have a rough 6 weeks ahead of them. What do we need to see to calm everybody's nerves that this really is a World Series team?
Well, I mean, I think just to be competitive and to win series, as I think we talked about earlier in the show, they've lost 3 series in a row now, and that's not what you want to do. I think they need to win against the Braves. That's really, the Braves have really hit a slump here, but they have a lot of games left against them, and the Braves could make up a lot of ground head to head if they can pull that off.
Yeah.
So I think those are important. I think ending with the best record in the league, at least, and baseball overall, if possible, is really important for this team. It is for every team, but the Phillies are so comfortable at home and they feel so good playing at home, regardless, even though we all know what happened in the last 2 games against Arizona last fall. But if they can have the home field advantage throughout, I think that would be the thing I would be playing for now, even more than winning the division.
Paul, one final question for me. As we hit that trade deadline, as we talked about, if you took the top 9, 10, 11 infield players, not including pitchers, anybody on that you would trade away if you could get a better deal? Is there anybody untouchable, or who would you deal?
On the Phillies?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, I think you listen to anything, right? I don't think you can rule out anything out of hand, but, they're not going to trade Harper. They're not going to trade Turner, and partly because of the contracts. I mean, those are big contracts, and they're hard to move. I would be reluctant to trade, say, an Edmundo Sosa, who might have some value to another team. But if I felt like I was getting something in return that was more than, Edmundo Sosa is a great guy to have to fill in, as he proved earlier this year. But if you have somebody who's going to play more regularly and can help you in a area that you need, and you have to give up a little of your insurance, then maybe that's something you have to think about.
So do you trade away, say, Brandon Marsh, one of those young pitchers on the farm, to get help now?
I think they still think Brandon Marsh has some upside. I think it's unfortunate, as I mentioned earlier, Rob Thompson talked a lot earlier this season about needing to get him at bats against left-handers, and he really hasn't either done it or been able to do it or felt comfortable doing it, or for whatever reason, he hasn't had that many. And when he has, I'm sure this is out of date, but last week I looked, he was batting 143 against left-handed pitching. So you're not gonna go into the postseason where if you play the Braves, excuse me, you're going to face at least a couple, left-handed starters, good ones. So, he's probably not going to start those games. So that's where you say to yourself, okay, who's going to be my right-handed bats, especially if you want to start Rojas for his defense, then you need a bat who's going to be an offensive force for you, I think, in that left field spot.
Hey, Paul, we just had the Hall of Fame weekend, and I know we asked you about this the very first time we talked to you several years ago, but I guess it was 2013. You got at the time, Spink Award honored in the Hall of Fame. Do you still think about that a lot? And, 11 years later, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you, I was fortunate enough to be in Cooperstown last weekend, and I went up to the area where they display the Writers Awards, and I always go look one time just to make sure they haven't changed their mind.
Well, Paul, let everybody know before we let you go where they can find your work, things you got going on, because we know you didn't retire. You're just not doing quite as much.
No, I'm doing some freelance for NBC Sports Philadelphia, writing for their website, and I've also written a book that I'm trying to get published. It's if anybody ever read the political book Boys on the Bus, about behind the scenes of a political campaign, my book is about behind the scenes of baseball writing. So all the people who said to me over the years, you got the greatest job in the world, I hope I get this published and you can go out and see what it's really all about.
Great.
Awesome.
That'll be great. Well, Paul, thanks for taking the time to join us. As always, we love talking baseball with you, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
all right,
Paul.
buddy.
Yep.
Thanks. Hey, Chet, what's going on over at the Irish Rover Station House during this sweltering month of July?
Well, Bill, I am glad you asked about that. You know the deal. The Irish Rover Station House in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, has Quizzo and Martini specials every Wednesday evening. There are great dinner specials Thursdays through Sundays. I had that picture here somewhere, and of course, I can't find it now. But yeah, dinner specials Thursday through Sunday. This week they have naked salmon, which is an Alaskan salmon that really got my attention. I love salmon. Plus, Thursday also means killer burgers, and they have a couple of real good ones this time around. And the Irish Rover is doing something kind of special also right now. On Saturday, the Irish Rover has Christmas in July. Yeah, so all afternoon and evening, the Irish Rover is celebrating Christmas in July. You can wear holiday or tropical attire and enjoy one of the many drink specials that'll be on the menu. Make me a mistletoe margarita. That is one of the choices. Of course, the Irish Rover always has 24 beers on tap. You know that. We have a terrific waitstaff happy hour specials. The Rover on Bellevue Avenue in Langhorne. And you can get all the details at IrishRoverStationHouse.com. You know that I love that place.
Hey everybody, it's Willie Nile here, and you're listening to Chet and Bill on Philly Pressbox Radio. You lucky people.
And you know, Bill, that the fact that they're going to be celebrating Christmas in July Saturday, I mean, even though it is July, I may have to dig out one of my ugly sweaters and pop over there.
Oh, spare them. I'm glad I won't be there. Hey, right. It is football season, pal. Start today. Eagles camp is open. There's open.
Bill, you froze. You froze up a little bit.
And we are buzzing. We are buzzing out here. The football camps are opening all over the country.
Yeah, this is the real start of it for a lot of people, of course. I mean, we had the draft, we had free agency, we had the OTAs, and, you know, there's stuff written about football all year long, but it really begins for a lot of people right now when the training camps open. Before you know it, we'll have preseason games, and then September 6th is when it all begins for real. And with that in mind, Bill, let me see. Yeah, we are exactly 44 days away. You know who that guy is. Pete Retzlaff, the former Eagle, the late, great Eagle. 44 days from now, that is 6 weeks and 2 days, the regular season opener down in Brazil. Let's go, Bill.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and everybody else is too. And that's the fun part about this time of the year. Because you got baseball going full swing. Now you got football starting up, and basketball and hockey not too far behind. This is fun summertime for a Philly sports fan, for all sports fans.
Yeah, and we're going to be joined by our second guest in just a minute. He goes by the initials BLG, Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation. In the meantime, though, Bill, let me ask you, are you concerned about the Phillies now that they've lost 2 out of 3 series and the bats have gone kind of silent in many of those games?
No, I'm really not. I'm concerned about Alvarado. I have been all along. Soto was hot there for a while, was pitching really well. He's had a couple missteps. Kirkring has now had a couple missteps. Even Strom and Hoffman gave up runs recently. But I think they're going to be okay. And it's nice to have a 9-game lead as we talk about a team that's struggling. The other thing, too, Chet, that I think has gone under the radar that everybody wants to kill Nick Castellanos all the time. You know how hard it is to raise your average 50 points, with all, in this many games. He's gone from being a 190 hitter to up to about a 240 hitter. And he always gets better when school gets out and his kids get around, his family gets around. And, good for Nick. And maybe it seems like the boo birds are off his back a little bit, too.
Yeah, he was down below 200 briefly, and now he's up to 240, as you said, so he's doing okay. Meanwhile, Kyle Schwarber has gone in the other direction. He snapped an 0 for 20 slump today with a big two-run hit, but other than that, he's been really struggling the last 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, and that's where they have to pick each other up.
Yeah.
I think probably even Bohm, when he was hitting, 350 there for a while, and then he was hitting 290. So he struggled. Harper's probably been the most consistent of all, average-wise. It hasn't fluctuated from about maybe 290 to 310 throughout the season. But yeah, I mean, that's where the other guys have to pick up. Everybody in that game, when you're batting 600 times, 500 and 600 times, you're not going to stay hot all season long, and that's what the team part's all about. You got to pick each other up and score runs. Starting pitching's still been solid.
Yeah, I'm going to change our background to green right now, Bill, because we got the guy from Bleeding Green Nation ready to go.
There you go. Let's welcome the man that always has the birds covered. Bleeding Green Nation's Brandon Lee Gowton. BLG, welcome back to Philly Pressbox Radio. It's go time.
Yeah, day 1 of Eagles training camp. Back at it once again. Year 12 for me. Excited.
Yeah, BLG, day 1 in the books. And the big issue all summer has been, the relationship between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Both guys spoke today. What did we learn about that relationship?
I think we learned that it's not as simple as, the media is making something of nothing. It's a total fabrication. That's not what they said. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni did not say, everything is a lie. We love each other. Everything's great. I think that's intentional. I don't think they wanted to do that, in part because, maybe that's a little unrealistic. It comes off as a little insincere, not very authentic. If they say that, obviously, they're not going to come out and say they don't like each other as well. So I think they kind of towed the line there. I think I'll give credit to the Eagles PR staff here, who I think, had them certainly prepared for those kind of questions on the first day of training camp, especially after the what happened at the end of minicamp there and the comments by Jalen Hurts. So I think ultimately Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, they didn't exacerbate the situation, but I don't think they came out and really showed that everything was a lie and they're totally fine. There's no cracks.
Well, BLG, I don't care if they like each other or not. Is Jalen Hurts going to be a better football player this year than last year, and what's it going to take to do that?
I think Jalen Hurts will be, in part because I think he was a little bit unlucky last year in terms of, you look at some of those turnovers that he had. Those are higher rates than the rest of his career, really. So I think he's due for some positive regression in that sense. We saw that with kind of Dak Prescott, who had, that really interception heavy to a new level he ever had in 2022. And then last year, those numbers predictably came down. So I think some of it is just a matter of, him getting back to the norm for his career a little bit. I also think, it's one training camp practice and he didn't look super crisp in the spring, but on the first day of training camp, Jalen Hurts looked a lot more efficient, a lot more crisp. The offense as a whole, followed suit. So I think, bringing Kellen Moore in here, I think that can obviously make a difference for Jalen Hurts and try to maximize him more than the Eagles were able to last year.
Well, it's because you mentioned Kellen Moore. How will the offense look different this year? Of course, you got Saquon Barkley now in the mix. Will the offense look a lot different, do you think?
I think Saquon is obviously going to be a big part of things here. We also saw on the first day of practice a lot of pre-snap motion, which has been a big talking point, considering the Eagles were towards the bottom of the league in that category, surprisingly so in years past. I also noticed something that really stood out to me on the first day was the Eagles' use of tempo. I thought Jalen Hurts looked really comfortable in that setting, and maybe that's a kind of a way to get him in a rhythm is, get that offense operating fast and have him make quick decisions. Obviously, you want to use Jalen Hurts for his legs and his playmaking ability at times, but sometimes it's nice to kind of just have him play point guard and dump it off and let his talented skill players do the heavy lifting for him. And that's something we saw on the first day of training camp. And he basically didn't have any completions today other than when Devontae Smith had a drop. So that's something that I think Kellen Moore can incorporate at the right times.
Do you know in the offseason, did Jalen and his receivers get together? You know how they have a lot of that goes on around the league, wherever the quarterback lives or whatever, that they all go to his area and practice. Did that happen? I don't recall reading anything about that.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts, he did post some things about that. He was talking about that a little bit today at training camp. I think he's definitely aware of that. He doesn't like to give too many details when people ask about it in the spring practices about what that's going to look like. He kind of just, I think he said he kind of posts about it here and there. But certainly, yeah, that's been he did mention that in today's press conference, and he kind of had a smile with that too. I think that's something he looks forward to, not only building the chemistry on the field as players, but also off the field, personality wise too. And Jalen Hurts has certainly been criticized or questioned for leadership after last year, and I think that's something he is aware of and he is working on.
Brandon, one big difference this year will be the absence of number 62 under center. No Jason Kelce, so Cam Jurgens steps in. Is he ready, for this assignment? It's not just the fact that he's playing center. Kelce was such a big guy in the clubhouse, a team leader. So I don't know if he has to be that, but is Jurgens ready for all this?
Impossible shoes to fill, considering how great Jason Kelce is. And that's not, I'm not trying to slam Cam Jurgens here. That's a testament to how good Jason Kelce was. I think Cam Jurgens can be realistically as good as you want him to be this year and still not Jason Kelce, because there's only one Jason Kelce. So, from everything we've seen in the past, when we've seen limited sample size, obviously, of Cam Jurgens playing center, he looked really good. He looked like he can do it. He has the athleticism, the movement skills. That's obviously crucial. What we've yet to see certainly is how it'll play out from a pre-snap phase. And that's not only just because of Cam Jurgens and what he's going to do in that regard, but also Jalen Hurts has talked about wanting more ownership there and more power and more control at the line of scrimmage. So that relationship will be interesting to see. That's something Jalen touched on today. I think, he talked about collaboration in that regard. So we'll see, just how that goes. Again, the leadership off the field, those kind of things, that's going to be just so hard to replace. And that's something probably Cam Jurgens might be able to earn credit more with over time, but obviously, there's other players in this locker room that will step up. And just for example, AJ Brown was the one breaking down the team huddle today in the first day of practice, and I thought that was significant. And I think he was trying to set a tone with that as one of the leaders, one of the captains on this roster.
Well, with it all said and done, the offense doesn't scare me too much because I think there's so many weapons. I think they're going to be good. Now, the defensive side, that one concerns me a little bit. Do they just even have enough personnel overall to be much better this year than they were last? Because the second half of last year, bad isn't even a good enough way to call it.
Yeah, historic collapse by the
there you go.
Incompetent. Okay. Yeah, just hopeless. I think the realistic vision, for the Eagles hiring Vic Fangio is not about, hey, this is going to be the number one defense in the NFL. And that's not to say they're not going to try. Obviously, anything they get beyond their expectations, great. Absolutely. They'll sign up for that. They'll take that. I think realistically, you're kind of just trying to avoid the defense, like they did last year, getting in the way and being such a liability that it just kind of wrecks the team. It wrecks the season. The offense can't overcome that. I think they're hoping that Vic Fangio can, at the very least, make them competent. And I think there's reason to believe, considering his track record, he can, help with that. The talent here, certainly, I think there's enough for him to piece it together where it's not the weakest defense or one of the very weakest defenses in the NFL. I think that's kind of has to be the realistic standard. It's not, again, about them being like the 85 Bears or, the Steel Curtain all of a sudden. That's not what this team, I think, is going to be. But there are some young talents who, if they step up, I think they have special kind of potential or top 10 potential. But I think more realistically, you're looking at a good defense, a solid defense, than an amazing defense.
Well, just like Kelce leaving on offense, we lost Fletcher Cox on defense. And I think it's going to be huge for both Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter to show that they are the real deal on that D-line. Do you agree?
I mean, the coaching staff, Vic Fangio, Clint Hurt, the Eagles defensive line coach, they've really set the table for, hey, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, not only do they need to step up in terms of their level of play and their quality, and certainly we've seen, more highs from Jalen Carter than we have Jordan Davis to this point. you're also going to need to play a lot. Like they've really emphasized that the snaps are going to go up, and they're going to need to be able to handle that role. And that's one thing the Eagles have had for years here with Fletcher Cox. Was not only, was he a good player, obviously, a really good player, certainly too at his peak, but he was basically always out there. He was incredibly durable for the most part. And, he was leading the Eagles in snaps played. So, the page turns here to, especially Jalen Carter, to kind of pick up the torch there and keep it going. So, not only, again, are they going to need to play better, but they're also going to need to play longer. And that's taxing and that's challenging. And really the Eagles organizational ethos, I think, has been that, they want to rotate their defensive linemen. But when you look at Vic Fangio's history, he kind of likes to lean on his starters a lot more. So I think the Eagles are also going to have to strike a balance between those two things.
What do you see them? Do you see them being in a 4-man front? And do they have 3 linebackers, or do you see them needing 2 linebackers? And are those linebackers good enough?
That's the perpetual question, isn't it, for the Eagles?
Right.
I'll answer often no, other than, your few exceptions here, including in 2022 when they went to the Super Bowl and had TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. But, I think we're going to see a lot of 2 linebackers early on in training camp. And then this is also matches what we saw in OTAs and minicamp. It is Devin White, who is coming off of a season where he was benched in the playoff game that he last played in when the Buccaneers were in Detroit to play the Lions, and he didn't play too much at all. I think Devin White is good so far early on, and he was injured last year. Maybe being healthier will make a difference for him. But again, he's coming off the season he did, and the Bucs certainly, who drafted him high, weren't dying to keep him by any means. There's some red flags there, and then it looks like it'll be Zach Bond, starting next to him. Nakobe Dean is still a factor here, but Zach Bond has been the first guy up in some of these practices, and that's a kind of a question mark considering. He himself talked about maybe playing more edge when he signed with the Eagles, and that's something that he kind of seemed to excel more at with the Saints when he was kind of getting after the quarterback as opposed to being an off-ball linebacker. So there's kind of, a tweener thing going on here. But again, from early on, I've seen some athleticism to that Zach Bond. He actually had a really nice pass breakup today on a pass up the seam by Kenny Pickett intended for CJ Uzama that Zach Bond was able to knock down. So there is some athleticism there. That's good to see. But, those guys have a lot to prove still.
Yeah, the early reports, like from the OTAs especially, they really seem to like Zach Bond. So hopefully he will be the real deal. Nakobe Dean, coming off, an injury-filled season last year, a lot of pressure on him. Some people question whether he's even going to make the team. Will Nakobe Dean be on the roster in September, and will he play a lot?
Yeah, so I think the key thing to note here is that, when you look at any NFL organization, but we'll specifically talk about the Eagles here, not everyone is necessarily pulling in the same direction or is always on the same page. And by that, I mean that I still think the front office, Howie Roseman, and that side of things, they drafted Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round. They have high hopes for him. I still think that's true, but I think they're not necessarily on the same page as Vic Fangio and the coaching staff, the new linebackers coach there, Bobby King, who do not have that loyalty to Nakobe Dean and are more inclined to just play the best guy that they think is, suitable for the job. So ultimately, I think Nakobe's on this roster because I don't think Howie is going to cut him, but I do think, the coaching staff is going to lean, unless, things change in a significant way, towards Bond and White, who are obviously more experienced players. And I think Nakobe's going to have to find a way to make his way on the field. And I don't feel amazing about that just because obviously there's the injury history of Nakobe Dean. But even when he has been healthy, I just don't think he's shown enough.
Well, Brandon, you study the Eagles every day. Now 2024 is getting ready to start. Have you been able to, in your mind, conclude what happened in the second half of 2023 and why that collapse happened? Coaching, personnel, where do you see it, and have they been able to correct it, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a little less mysterious than we typically think of it sometimes. Like, how did this possibly happen? I mean, we saw warning signs to some extent with they were playing over their heads a little bit. They were bound to come back to earth. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they were bound to fall apart like they absolutely did, but they panicked when they didn't need to. they had that tough stretch against the 49ers and the Cowboys. That was in a really tough part of the season where they're banged up. They're coming off game. They had played that Bills game in overtime. They had some extremely high snap counts in a lot of those games. The defense was just on the field all game long. I think they were exhausted. They obviously made a nonsensical defensive coordinator change that just no one was calling for in terms of like Matt Patricia being the solution to the Eagles season. That's just pretty ridiculous. So, they botched it. They panicked when they didn't need to panic. They regressed from playing over their heads earlier in the year. Typically people, talk about how in the NFL, one-score games can kind of be a coin flip, and eventually your luck in those is kind of going to even out. And we also saw that with the Vikings last year, who fell off after the year prior when they were winning all those one-score games. So I think ultimately, the bottom dropped out. Obviously, the culture was not strong enough too, which is a big concern, especially when it comes to Nick Sirianni and his purported strengths. So, there was a lot of things that went wrong. I think it's fair to still talk about this because it shouldn't be as simple as, well, the season ended, so now everything is fine. And they make roster moves and now everything is fine. Like, they have to go out there and prove it again. If the Eagles come out this season, and start the season slow, that's going to be a huge red flag.
So, Brandon, it's July 24th. As I put the schedule up, what is your way too early prediction? How many wins, how many losses for the Birds this year?
Yeah, so, I do think there's downside here when we talk about the collapse and everything and the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni relationship not necessarily being on the up and up and everything. But I come back to, I like this team's talent, especially on offense. I think they just have too much talent. Even when things were not great last year and they fired Brian Johnson and everything, and the offense didn't feel as good as it should have been, and it wasn't as good as it could have been, still a good offense by the numbers just alone from that category. And I think that speaks to the talent they have. So I still feel good about the talent and their schedule. Unlike last year, it's not the easiest schedule in the league, but I think it's pretty favorable for the most part. There's a lot of advantages baked into that schedule, especially more so at least than there are disadvantages. And you combine that with the fact that there just has not been a repeat NFC East winner in 20 years now, that it just feels like, and with the Cowboys not doing anything this offseason, and when you say static in the NFL, as the Eagles should know from last year in terms of not really changing a whole lot on offense, you get worse. So I think the Cowboys are poised to take a step back here. I don't think Dak's going to play as good again, and I think the Eagles are going to rise. I don't really take the Giants that seriously. The Commanders might be a little bit better, but I don't think they're challenging for the division title just yet. So, I like the Eagles to win something like 11 games and, be in position and win the NFC East.
And if things go a little bit off track with that, is Nick Sirianni on a short leash?
I think absolutely. I don't know about, in-season firing, just because we've not seen that really with Jeffrey Lurie, other than, they got rid of Chip Kelly a week before the season ended, which is, essentially over at that point. But, I have a hard time thinking that it could be week 5, I think is when the Eagles have their bye. And if the Eagles are getting off to a bad start, they'd make the switch then. Like, why would you keep Sirianni around if you're ready to, change that quickly afterwards? But maybe, they do. I mean, I think it's important to consider here that Vic Fangio, is an established head coach, has head coaching experience, as we know. And then you look at Kellen Moore. I mean, that's someone the Eagles interviewed to be their head coach before they ultimately hired Nick Sirianni. And then even the year before that, in 2020, that's someone they were kind of targeting potentially, if they could get a hold of him, to be Doug Peterson's offensive coordinator in his final season there. So, that's someone they like, and maybe they would turn the keys to him if things are really, really bad and out of control. But I think more likely Sirianni finishes the season as the head coach, for better or worse. And then the question is it good enough by then? And I'm going to say, with my prediction, that he does just enough to save his job and return for 2025, but not enough to really necessarily make you feel like, okay, he is definitely our guy and has us on the right track.
2 final things for you, Brandon. Give me 20 seconds on the 76ers. How you feeling about them this offseason with, the addition of Paul George, the draft picks, Embiid playing in Paris this next couple of weeks? What are you thinking?
I think I'm not ready to be excited about them. Like, conceptually right now, if the Sixers win the title next year, obviously I think I can think of myself in June or whenever that happens. Like, I'll be excited then. But that's obviously the very best case scenario. But after watching the Celtics win, I think that just so burned me out on really, like, what's the point anymore, even if we're going to see this happen. So would love to be wrong. I think, again, by the time the season rolls around, maybe I'll feel a little bit different. But right now, at this point in time, I just feel like I can't even enjoy them, especially with the Eagles starting and the Phillies looking pretty good, other than scuffling a little bit lately.
I understand. Hey, BLG, you mentioned this is your 12th year coming up covering the Eagles. It's also your 9th going on 10th year being on our show. Now, I'm not going to ask you to make a speech or anything,
Wow.
but we have to make note of this landmark occasion. First,
That's so good.
25, Brandon.
Thank you for doing that. It's an honor. It's been great talking to you guys all these years.
All right. Well, hey, BLG, before we let you go so more people can listen to you, tell us where they can follow you on all your social media platforms, things you have going out throughout the season.
Absolutely. bleedinggreennation.com is the hub for all your Eagles content that you need. Certainly incredibly active these days with all our training camp storylines, including my practice observations, which I have a lot of fun doing each day. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Threads and anything at Brandon Gowton, my first and last name there. And then as far as the BGN podcast, who knows? We'll see. Currently not active. I'm trying my best for those who ask about it when it might come back or something. Not in my control. Hoping there's good news sooner than later. But I would say just stay tuned and let's hope that something good happens.
And BLG, I just want to mention, when you were first on with us, it was September 9th of 2015. The Birds starting quarterback was Sam Bradford. The leading receiver that year was Jordan Matthews. So we go back a ways.
Wow. That's wild.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right, Brandon. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Hey, Chet, there are a bunch of great events happening with these Phillies teams this summer and fall. What's going on with the best tailgaters in Philadelphia? Bob Cavanaugh and the gang of Cavs Philly tailgates.
Well, you got to hang on, Bill, because I just totally lost my screen. Hang on. I can't see a thing.
Well, we can see you.
I know you can. This happened last week, too, at the beginning. Let's try it again. Oh, boy, oh, boy.
Well, I'll tell you what, us not seeing you is not really that bad of a thing.
Oh, here we go. We're back. I found it. Pressing the wrong button. Okay, so we want to talk about Cavs, right? Let's do that. This guy, Bob Cavanaugh, who, by the way, is in Alaska right now on vacation. How about that? Good for him. Cavs Philly tailgates is his business. You know that. He's been doing this for 35 years now, I think. You know Cav for his tailgate parties. He's a 3-time winner of Philly Tailgate's Jack Daniels Great American Tailgate Party Contest and a past winner of the Philly Daily News Tailgate Award. Cavs also does corporate events and parties, you name it. And, with the hated Yankees in Philly next week, Cav will be doing a big Wednesday morning tailgate before that afternoon's Yankees-Phillies game at CBP. You can get a ticket for just the tailgate, which begins at 9 a.m., by the way, or a combo ticket for the tailgate and the ball game. Get the details and order tickets via the website, phillytailgates.com. Cavs Philly Tailgates is the way to go. You know that Cavs works with Vince at Philly Sports Trips. They're the folks to use for Eagles road games and more. Check out the schedule of events and those road trips. It all begins with that week-long trip to Sao Paulo, Brazil for the Eagles-Packers season opener. Plus, there are shorter trips to all road games. And Vince and Cav are already working on next spring's Philly Springs training trip to Clearwater. Oh, by the way, there's the guys who will be joining Philly Sports Trips on those road games this year. Vince Papali, Deshaun McCoy, Brian Dawkins, Trot, among other. And regarding the trip to Clearwater next year, we just learned last week that Jason Worth will be the special guest for one of the 2 Clearwater trips. Get all the details at phillysportstrips.com.
Good stuff. Hey, Chet, Paul George had his welcome to Philly presser. Tyrese Maxey wants to bring a championship to Philly. The Sixers, they're tweaking the bench. This bunch is creating some optimism in town. How about you?
There's some optimism. I will say that there is some optimism. Like Brandon said, it's tough to get excited though in July when you got an Eagles training camp opening and the Phillies still have the best record in baseball. But yeah, I think it's been a very good couple of months for Daryl Morey with the draft and with the signing of Paul George. Paul George is 34, but he was the best free agent out there. And he certainly had a good press conference in his, arrival in Philly yesterday. So there's reason for optimism. It all comes down to the guys staying healthy and getting to know one another and playing well together. And then we'll see what happens. We're feeling kind of good about it here on July 24th. Let's see how we feel about it in November and, more importantly, next May and June.
Yeah, well, the thing about it to me is it doesn't feel like no matter what you do, who you bring in, it doesn't matter unless Embiid is what he needs to be, and that's why it's hard to get excited about it. George is a good player. Maxey is going to be a great player. But it all goes around Embiid, and if he can't get it done, it don't matter who you have.
Yeah, that is true. It all comes down to the big guy. As you said, we'll be watching him over in the Olympics in Paris over the next couple of weeks, see how Team USA does. Mike Sealski has argued that this is a good thing for Embiid. Some fans worry about, him getting hurt, but you can get hurt anytime. And the pro is that he will be around all these other professionals and hopefully, see their work ethic and it'll rub off on him. So who knows? It's going to be an interesting season. We'll say that.
Yeah, I think so. And we hope they do what we need them to do. But it's just hard to get too awful excited. Hey, on another basketball note, what did you think about LeBron James being named the flag carrier for the Olympics and opening ceremonies? How's that?
I know a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't like LeBron, but I mean, it's the guy's fourth Olympics. He's won a couple of gold medals already. He is, the de facto leader of the USA team. So it is what it is. I don't have a strong feeling either way. And Coco Gauff, the tennis player, also getting the honor for the women. So, that's nice. How do you feel about it, Bill?
I actually don't really have a problem with it. I've been an up and down guy with LeBron. I liked him a lot when he was younger. I kind of fell out of favor with him when he wanted to become the spokesman for the NBA, and things started to seem to always be focused on him. I didn't care much about that, but he's done a lot of good things, and he's not been a bad actor off the.
Yeah.
Problem with that because Katie Ledecky should be carrying the flag for the women. She should be the face of the U.S. women's Olympic team, and for whatever reason, she's not.
Speaking of the Olympics, Bill, the opening ceremony Friday, I think they already have some things going on either today or tomorrow they start. How much of the Olympics do you typically watch, and what will you be focusing on over the next couple of weeks? Anything in particular?
Yeah, I like the swimming, and I like the track and field. When you get in the Olympics and the way these athletes, male and females, can run the relays and run the sprints, they are just electric to me. And the Americans have some really, really good runners this year too. I like the diving as well. I think that's fun. Yeah. The gymnastics I've kind of soured on a little bit with that, but yeah, I watch it. I do watch it. I enjoy it. And one of my bucket list items is to go to an Olympics. It's just something I just think would be really neat to experience one time.
Well, they'll be in Salt Lake City later this decade, so there you go.
Yeah.
I'll be watching probably men's basketball, maybe some of the women's basketball, tennis, perhaps if it's on. I don't even know, when they have these things scheduled.
You'll be watching breakdancing too, won't you?
I was going to get to that. Yeah, a little bit of the swimming and diving for sure. Yeah, I will not be watching the breakdancing, Bill.
I thought maybe you were going to put it to be a judge for that.
No, not my thing. Not my thing.
Yep, I enjoy the Olympics, and I love watching winter and summer Olympics. I enjoy them both.
All right.
Hey, we had a great guest tonight, Paul Hagen and Brandon Lee Gowton. Who's coming to Philly Pressbox Radio next week?
Just booked him today, Bill. We're going to talk baseball with Steve Jeltz, Phillies legendary shortstop. You know him, you love him. Good guy. Had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times through the Dalton Foundation and some of their great events. So we had him on last year, and he's going to come back and join us live next week, 7 p.m.
Yeah, Steve was great when we had him on the first time, and he loves to talk baseball. Good man. Good.
He does a lot in the Harrisburg area for the disadvantaged youth out there. So good guy.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, there was Flyers in town, and Matvey Michkov. How about him showing up at the airport in New York with a Phillies hat and gets met by the team president and the general manager, who's now his stick boy.
Look how happy Danny and Keith Jones are, man. They know that this guy could, bring the Flyers back to contention again. If he's as good as everybody thinks he is, and you get a good goalie, of course, they could be in the hunt within a couple of years.
Yeah, I tell you what, you talk about special treatment when those bosses go to pick you up in New York so you don't get lost and maybe end up in one of the New York teams. You can't have that. But how about, I just thought it was funny with Briere carrying the sticks.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Hey, Bill, the past week, we talk about this every week. We're losing a lot of the guys that we grew up watching or, following. Right after a show last week, we got the word that Pat Williams had died. We had him on our show several years ago, and I reposted a chunk of that interview. What a great guy. And I remember on the show when we had Pat Williams on, I mentioned that I haven't read 100 books in my life, and I don't think you have either. He's written over 100 books. So rest in peace, Pat Williams.
We're losing these lifers.
Yeah.
And Pat was certainly one of them. And humble beginnings,
For sure. We also lost, let's see. Oh, Bob Newhart, the great Bob Newhart. Now, what a legend he was, 94 years old. And because of his death, one of the catchy comedy or MeTV channels over the weekend ran a marathon of all three of his sitcoms. So I watched a whole bunch of them. I think I watched 7 or 8 of them. Some of the original Bob Newhart show episodes, and then a few of the Newharts. They didn't show the last one for some reason, with the great ending. But, oh, man, what a show that was. Bob Newhart, may he rest easy also.
Yeah, he was a good one.
He was so good. And this guy is still alive. Sonny Hill just celebrated birthday number 88 on Monday. So happy birthday to Sonny. And, Bill, I have to do this also. Speaking of birthdays, coming up this weekend, or Friday, I guess, Mick Jagger celebrates birthday number 81. They just finished up yet another Rolling Stones tour. And Kate Beckinsale, the same day, celebrates birthday number 51. This should be a national day. Maybe not here, but at least in the UK.
You only mentioned Mick's birthday, so you could mention Kate's birthday.
They share July 26th as their birthday, 30 years apart.
Yeah, right. Hey, one other thing I'll point out. I posted this on Facebook this morning. I had a chance to actually spend a few minutes talking to that Pete Rose last night. I'm out here in Cleveland at the memorabilia show. They had a welcome. It was setup day yesterday, and they had a welcoming for vendors and some people. And Pete was kind of the guest of honor. Pete is 83. Father Time is catching up to him a little bit. He did not get up in front of everybody and talk, but he kind of sat on a sofa and everybody could go sit next to him, take pictures, talk to him, and all that. So it was real cool, and he just loves to talk baseball. It's always an opportunity. A few times I've had a chance to talk to him, but this time I actually got to sit with him in a few minutes. It was real neat.
Very nice. 83 years young, Pete Rose. All right, Bill, wrap it up. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Let's thank tonight's special guests, Paul Hagen and Brandon Lee Gowton. Our sponsors, the Irish Rover Station House, Cavs Philly Tailgate, and PPCC 118 Raz Road. For Jim Chet Chesko, this is Bill Furman. We hope you enjoy the show. We'll join Philly Pressbox Radio next Wednesday, July 31st at 7 p.m. I'll actually be back in the Florida Press Box in my little spot. So you can see us live on Facebook or on our Philly Pressbox Radio YouTube channel. Listen on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadios, and all the others. High hopes, Philadelphia sports fans, and let's go Phillies.
And congrats to your son and his bride on their wedding as well.
We'll talk about that some more next week.
Okay.
I hope he had